The emergency beacon screamed through the void of space, carrying with it the final desperate message from the dying world of Kalara. Ambassador Maria Santos read the transmission with growing horror as the holographic display showed entire cities being reduced to ash. The Drachnary Empire had arrived at yet another peaceful world, and the pattern was always the same. First came the ultimatum, then the bombardment, then silence. How many does that make now? Admiral David Reynolds asked from across the briefing room at Terran Defense Command. His weathered face showed the strain of watching helpless as civilization, after civilization fell to the Drachnary war machine. 17 worlds in the past 6 months, Maria replied, her voice tight with frustration. The Galactic Council refuses to act. They say it's an internal matter between the Drachnary and these smaller species. Reynolds slammed his fist on the metal table. The sound echoed through the sterile chamber where Earth's military leadership gathered each morning to count the dead. Outside the reinforced windows, the blue marble of Earth hung peaceful and serene. Unaware that its turn might come sooner than anyone expected, the Drachnary Empire had grown bold in recent years. Their red-scaled warriors believed that strength alone determined a species' right to exist. They had built their civilization on conquest and slavery, spreading across the galaxy like a cancer. The peaceful races fell before them one by one, their pleas for help falling on deaf ears in the grand chambers of the Galactic Council. "What did the Quillith say when you contacted them?" Reynolds asked, though he already knew the answer. The same thing they always say: they're monitoring the situation. They don't want to escalate tensions by intervening directly. Maria's laugh was bitter. The Quillith have the most advanced technology in the galaxy, but they're too comfortable to risk a war that might disrupt their perfect society. The Quillith Collective ruled through pure intellectual superiority. Their silver-skinned scientists had unlocked secrets of the universe that other species couldn't even comprehend. They lived in crystal cities that floated through space, sustained by technology that seemed like magic to lesser civilizations. But for all their power, they were content to observe and analyze rather than act. "And the Vorthan?" Reynolds asked, though he expected no better news. High Counselor Zira sent. His usual response: "The Vorthan hegemony maintains its position of neutrality in all conflicts between younger species." Maria's fingers clenched around the datapad. They've been alive for thousands of years, and they think in terms of centuries. A few dozen worlds being destroyed is just a minor fluctuation to them. The Vorthan were the oldest species in the galaxy, ancient beings who had achieved immortality through technology that merged flesh with living metal. They had seen empires rise and fall like waves on a beach. Their golden skin and glowing eyes held the wisdom of ages, but also the cold detachment that came from watching the universe repeat its cycles of violence and peace. Reynolds walked to the window and stared out at the stars. Somewhere out there, the Drachnary fleets were moving toward their next target. The intelligence report suggested they were running out of easy prey. Soon they would need to challenge one of the major powers or find new hunting grounds. "They're going to come for US eventually," he said quietly. "The Drachnary see humanity as weak. We've only been part of the Galactic Council for 30 years. In their eyes, we're just another species of primitive creatures playing at civilization." Maria joined him at the window. "The council meeting is tomorrow. I'll present our evidence about the Drachnary expansion and formally request intervention. You know what they'll say, I know, but we have to try." The next morning, Maria stood in the vast chamber of the Galactic Council. The circular room stretched for kilometers, with representatives from hundreds of species arranged in tiers that reached toward the domed ceiling. The architecture was designed to humble visitors, to remind them of their place in the grand scheme of galactic civilization. High Commander Gorvik of the Drachnary Empire sat in his designated section, his red scales gleaming under the artificial lights. He was a massive creature, nearly 3 meters tall, with claws that could tear through steel and eyes that burned with the fury of a predator. When Maria began her presentation, he listened with the patience of a hunter watching wounded prey. The Evidence is clear, Maria said, her voice carrying through the chamber's acoustic systems. The Drachnary Empire has systematically eliminated 17 peaceful civilizations in the past 6 months. They show no signs of stopping. We request immediate intervention under Article 7 of the Galactic Accords. Gorvik rose slowly, his massive form casting a shadow across the human delegation. The Drachnary Empire has done nothing that violates galactic law. We have claimed worlds that were poorly defended by weak species. This is the natural order of things. The strong survive, the weak perish. You're talking about genocide, Maria. Shot back, billions of innocent beings have died. Innocence is a luxury that evolution cannot afford, Gorvik replied. Your species should understand this better than most. Did humanity not conquer its own world through violence? Did you not eliminate the weaker forms of life that stood in your way? Maria felt the weight of truth in his words, but she pressed on. We evolved beyond that. We learned to coexist, to protect those who cannot protect themselves. Gorvik's laugh was like the sound of grinding stone. And that is why humanity will never be more than a minor species. You have grown soft. You have forgotten the lessons that made you strong. High Counselor Zereth of the Vorthan hegemony spoke next, his voice carrying the authority of millennia. The Drachnari speak harshly, but they operate within the bounds of galactic law. No species is required to protect another. Each civilization must prove its worth through its own strength. The Quillith representative, a tall figure with skin like polished silver, nodded in agreement. The collective has observed these events with interest. The Drachnari expansion follows predictable patterns. When they encounter sufficient resistance, they will redirect their efforts elsewhere. And in the meantime, how many more worlds will earn? Maria demanded. That is not our concern, Zereth replied. The hegemony has survived for 10,000 years by avoiding unnecessary conflicts. We will not risk our civilization for species that lack the wisdom to defend themselves. Maria felt the familiar weight of dismissal settling over the chamber. She had seen this before, the way the major powers looked at humanity like adults, watching children play at war. To them, humans were useful for their adaptability and industrial capacity, but they were not equals. They were not worthy of protection, and they certainly were not capable of protecting others. Your species lacks the military capability to influence such matters, Gorvik said, his voice filled with contempt. Perhaps you should focus on ensuring your own survival rather than concerning yourselves with affairs beyond your understanding. The session ended with no action taken. Maria returned to Earth with empty hands and a heavy heart. The galaxy's powers had made their position clear. Humanity was expendable, and the weak would die while the strong watched from their comfortable positions. That night, as Maria filed her report, she received an unexpected visitor. Dr. Emily Foster arrived at the embassy with a face full of secrets, and eyes that burned with desperate hope. I need to speak with Admiral Reynolds immediately, she said. It's about Project Prometheus. Maria had heard whispers of the project, rumors of some classified military research that had been consuming resources for years. But she had never imagined it might be the key to everything. What is Project Prometheus? She asked. Foster's smile was grim. It's how we're going to change the galaxy forever. Deep within the Luna shipyards, where Earth's moon blocked the view from prying sensors, the most ambitious project in human history was taking shape. Dr. Emily Foster walked through the massive construction bay, her footsteps echoing off the metal walls that stretched for kilometers in every direction. Above her, thousands of workers moved like ants across the hull of a vessel that defied every convention of spacecraft design. The Prometheus was a monster of engineering, 12 kilometers, of hardened alloy and experimental weapon systems. Its hull was black as the void between stars, designed to absorb sensor radiation and make the ship nearly invisible to conventional detection methods. But it was what lay within that hull that would change everything. The quantum resonance cannon is ready for final testing, Chief Engineer Alex Rodriguez reported as he joined Foster at the observation deck. His face was drawn with exhaustion from months of working 18-hour days, but his eyes burned with the excitement of a man who knew he was building history. "What about the exotic matter containment?" Foster asked, her attention focused on the massive weapon that ran through the ship's central core. The cannon was beautiful in its deadliness, a crystalline structure that seemed to bend light around itself. "Stable for now," Rodriguez replied. "But we're dealing with forces that can tear apart the fabric of space itself. If the containment field fails during firing, the explosion will make a supernova look like a candle flame," Foster nodded grimly. The quantum resonance cannon was based on technology that humanity had barely begun to understand. It worked by creating microscopic tears in spacetime, then amplifying them until they could destabilize the molecular bonds that held matter together. When fired at a planet, it would cause the world's core to collapse in on itself, creating a chain reaction that would crack the planet apart like an egg. "The risks are acceptable," she said finally. "What choice do we have?" Rodriguez knew she was right. The Prometheus project had been born from humanity's deepest fears about their place in the galaxy. For 15 years, ever since joining the Galactic Council, humans had watched the major powers play their games of politics and intimidation. They had seen what happened to species that couldn't defend themselves, and they had vowed never to be defenseless again. "Captain Mitchell wants to run another simulation," Rodriguez said. "He's not satisfied with the tactical projections." Foster wasn't surprised. Captain Thomas Mitchell had been chosen to command the Prometheus because of his experience in the Centauri border wars, where human forces had faced alien technology for the first time. He was a careful man who understood that their first mission would likely be their last if they made any mistakes. They found Mitchell in the ship's command center, surrounded by holographic displays showing battle scenarios. He was a tall man, with graying hair and eyes that had seen too much war. His crew worked around him with the quiet efficiency of professionals who knew their lives depended on getting every detail right. "The Drachnary fleet formations are designed to overwhelm through sheer numbers," Mitchell explained as Foster and Rodriguez approached. "They use swarm tactics, sending hundreds of small ships to saturate defensive fire while their heavy cruisers move in for the kill." "And our response?" Foster asked. "We stay mobile and use our superior firepower to thin their ranks. But if they surround us, even the Prometheus won't survive concentrated fire from 80 ships." Mitchell's expression was grim. "We get one shot at this. If we fail, humanity becomes a target for every major power in the galaxy." Tactical Officer Lisa Shun looked up from her console. "The weapon tracking systems are calibrated for planetary targets. We've never tested them against moving ships." "Then we'll have to learn quickly," Mitchell replied. "The Drachnary won't wait for us to perfect our techniques." The truth was that none of them knew exactly how the Prometheus would perform in combat. The ship had been designed around a single concept, the ability to destroy worlds. Everything else was secondary. Its shields were experimental, its propulsion system was untested, and its crew was flying blind into a battle that would determine humanity's future. "What's the status on the other ships?" Foster asked. "The Titan is 3 months from completion," Rodriguez reported. "The Omega is still in early construction phases. If we lose the Prometheus, it will be at least a year before we have another planet killer ready." Foster felt the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. She had overseen every aspect of the Prometheus project, from the initial theoretical work to the final weapon systems. If the ship failed, the blame would rest with her. But if it succeeded, humanity would finally have a voice in galactic affairs. "Admiral Reynolds is requesting a final briefing," Chun announced. "He wants to know if we're ready to proceed." Mitchell looked around the command center at his crew. They were volunteers, all men and women who had stepped forward knowing they might not survive the mission. Each one had skills that made them irreplaceable, but more importantly, each one had the courage to bet everything on humanity's future. "We're as ready as we'll ever be," he said finally. The briefing took place in the Luna facility's main conference room, with Admiral Reynolds presiding over the gathered representatives of Earth's military and political leadership. The room was stark and functional, designed for making hard decisions rather than comfortable conversation. General Hayes has raised some concerns about the mission. Reynolds began, nodding toward a stern-faced woman in military uniform. She believes we're moving too fast. General Patricia Hayes stood and activated a holographic display showing the current galactic situation. Our intelligence suggests that the Quillith have detected unusual energy signatures from the Luna system. They're asking questions about our activities here. What kind of questions? Foster asked. The kind that suggests they know we're building something significant. The Quillith don't ask casual questions about minor species activities. Hayes' expression was troubled. If they discover what we're really doing, they might decide to act preemptively. You're talking about the most intellectually advanced species in the galaxy, Reynolds pointed out. They don't act on emotion or fear. They calculate risks and benefits. Exactly, Hayes replied. And a species with planet-killing capability represents a significant risk to their comfortable existence. They might decide that humanity needs to be eliminated before we become a threat. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. The Quillith had the technology to sterilize Earth's surface without ever entering the solar system. Their crystal ships could manipulate matter at the molecular level, turning entire worlds into whatever they desired. If they decided humanity was a threat, the species would end without warning. We have to assume they already know, Foster said quietly. The exotic matter reactions required for the quantum cannon produce energy signatures that can't be hidden from their sensors. They're probably watching us right now. Then why haven't they acted? Reynolds asked. Because they're curious, Mitchell interjected. The Quillith study everything. They want to see what we've built before they decide whether to destroy us. The debate continued for hours, but the conclusion was inevitable. The Prometheus was humanity's only chance to gain respect in a galaxy that viewed them as expendable. The risks were enormous, but the alternative was slow extinction as the major powers carved up the galaxy between themselves. The mission is approved, Reynolds announced finally. Captain Mitchell, you have full authority to engage enemy forces. As you see fit, Dr. Foster, the weapon systems are your responsibility. Make sure they work when we need them. As the meeting dispersed, Foster found herself alone with Reynolds in the empty conference room. The Admiral looked every one of his 60 years, worn down by the weight of decisions that would determine humanity's fate. Do you really think this will work? He asked. The technology is sound, Foster replied. The quantum resonance cannon will do exactly what we designed it to do. The question is whether we can survive long enough to use it. Reynolds nodded slowly. And if we can't? Then humanity dies with dignity instead of begging for mercy that will never come. The next morning, the Prometheus launched from Luna under cover of a solar storm that would mask its energy signature. The ship moved through the outer solar system like a ghost, its black hull invisible against the starry background. Its destination was the Kalara system, where the Draknari fleet was preparing to exterminate another peaceful civilization. Foster watched from the observation deck as Earth fell away behind them. Somewhere in the galaxy, the major powers were making their calculations about humanity's future. The Quillith were analyzing their data. The Vorthan were consulting their ancient wisdom, and the Draknari were sharpening their claws, but for the first time in 30 years, humanity was not helpless. They had built something that could crack worlds apart, and they were prepared to use it. The galaxy would learn that the small blue world had teeth, and those teeth were sharp enough to bite through planets. The Prometheus disappeared into hyperspace, carrying with it the hopes and fears of an entire species. The next time the galaxy heard from humanity, everything would be different. The Kalara system burned with the fires of genocide when the Prometheus emerged from hyperspace. Captain Mitchell watched from his command chair as the tactical display showed 80 Draknari warships surrounding the peaceful world. Their weapons, systematically reducing cities to radioactive craters. The beautiful blue-green planet that had once been home to 3 billion Kaleri was dying before his eyes. Sensor sweep complete, reported Tactical Officer Chun. The Draknari fleet is arranged in standard bombardment formation. They're not expecting any resistance. Mitchell studied the enemy positions with the cold calculation of a predator. The Draknari ships were massive, each one bristling with weapons designed to intimidate weaker species. Their hulls were painted in the blood-red colors of their empire, and their crews were trained from birth to show no mercy to those they considered inferior. "Communications, open a channel to the Draknari fleet," Mitchell ordered. "Channel open, sir." Mitchell stood and faced the main view screen as the image of War Chief Thrakos appeared. The Draknari commander was a towering figure, his red scales scarred from countless battles. His eyes burned with the fury of a species that had conquered half the galaxy through sheer brutality. "This is Captain Mitchell of the Terran vessel Prometheus," he began, his voice carrying the authority of a man who held the power to destroy worlds. "You are ordered to cease your bombardment of Kalara and withdraw immediately." Thrakos threw back his massive head and laughed, a sound like grinding stone that echoed through the command center. "A single human ship dares to challenge the might of the Draknari Empire? You amuse me, little mammal. Your species should have learned its place by now." "This is your final warning," Mitchell replied calmly. "Withdraw or face the consequences." "The consequences?" Thrakos leaned forward, his claws scraping against his command chair. "I have 80 ships under my command. Each one is more powerful than anything your primitive species has ever built. You will die screaming and your world will burn for this insult." The transmission ended and Mitchell returned to his command chair. Around him, his crew worked with the quiet efficiency of professionals who knew they were about to make history. The Prometheus was alone against overwhelming odds, but it carried within its hull the power to change the galaxy forever. "All ships are targeting us," Chun reported. "They're moving to surround us. Let them come," Mitchell replied. "Weapons, prepare to engage. Engineering, bring the shields to full power." The first Draknari attack came like a storm of fire and death. Dozens of ships opened fire simultaneously, their weapons designed to overwhelm any defensive system through sheer volume. The space around the Prometheus lit up with energy beams and missile trails as the aliens demonstrated why they had conquered world after world. The human ship's shields flared as they absorbed the incoming fire, but they held. The Prometheus had been designed to survive the initial assault from a superior force, and its defensive systems were beyond anything the Draknari had encountered before. The ship shuddered under the impact, but it remained intact. "Shields holding at 80%, Chief Engineer Rodriguez reported from the engineering deck. "The exotic matter generators are stable." Mitchell smiled grimly. The Draknari had expected quick victory, but they were facing technology that their primitive minds couldn't comprehend. The Prometheus was more than just a ship. It was the culmination of humanity's determination to never again be helpless. "Return fire," Mitchell ordered. "Show them what humanity can do." The Prometheus responded with weapons that redefined the concept of destruction. Its primary batteries unleashed beams of coherent energy that could punch through the hull of a Draknari cruiser like paper. Its missile systems fired warheads that could track their targets through hyperspace and detonate with the force of small stars. The first Draknari ship died in a flash of brilliant light, its hull vaporized by weapons that operated on principles the aliens had never imagined. Then a second ship exploded, and a third. The human vessel moved through the enemy formation like a shark among minnows, its advanced systems targeting and destroying ships faster than the Draknari could react. "Impossible," Thrakos snarled as he watched his fleet being systematically destroyed. "No single ship can have this much firepower." But the Prometheus was not just any ship. It was the product of human ingenuity combined with reverse-engineered alien technology, built by a species that had learned to survive by adapting and innovating. Every system had been designed to exceed the capabilities of the galaxy's major powers, and now those systems were proving their worth. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission from the Draknari flagship," Chun reported. "Thrakos is requesting terms for surrender." Mitchell considered the request for a moment. The Drachneri had shown no mercy to the Kaleri, and their empire was built on the suffering of countless innocent species. But humanity was fighting for more than just revenge. They were fighting for the right to exist as equals in a galaxy that had dismissed them as irrelevant. "Tell him to withdraw his fleet and never return to this system," Mitchell replied. "This is his only chance." The transmission that came back was filled with rage and defiance. "The Drachneri Empire does not retreat from inferior species. I have called for reinforcements. Soon you will face the full might of our forces." Mitchell had hoped it wouldn't come to this, but he had always known it might be necessary. The Drachneri understood only strength, and they needed to see humanity's true power before they would accept defeat. "All crew, prepare for quantum resonance cannon deployment," he announced over the ship's communication system. "This is not a drill." The Prometheus changed as its most terrible weapon came online. The ship's hull reconfigured itself, opening panels that revealed the crystalline structure of the quantum cannon. Energy readings throughout the system spiked as exotic matter was channeled through containment fields that barely held the forces of creation itself. "Target the asteroid belt," Mitchell ordered. "We're going to give them a demonstration they'll never forget." Dr. Foster's voice came through the communication system from the weapon control center. "Quantum resonance cannon is ready to fire. All safety protocols are active." Mitchell looked at the tactical display showing the massive asteroid field that orbited Keller's star. The rocks were remnants of a world that had been destroyed billions of years ago, now serving as a memorial to the galaxy's violent past. In a few moments, they would become a warning about its future. "Fire," Mitchell ordered. The quantum resonance cannon unleashed forces that existed at the very foundation of reality. The beam that emerged from the Prometheus was invisible to normal sensors, but its effects were immediately apparent. The asteroid field, which had existed for geological ages, simply ceased to exist. Millions of tons of rock and metal were reduced to their component atoms in an instant, creating a brilliant flash of light that could be seen across the star system. The silence that followed was deafening. Even the Drachneri, who had spent their lives surrounded by violence and destruction, were stunned by the casual display of power. They had never imagined that any species possessed the ability to simply erase matter from existence. "Message to the Drachneri fleet," Mitchell said quietly. "This is what we can do to asteroids. Imagine what we can do to your worlds." The response came within minutes. The Drachneri fleet, which had seemed so powerful and unstoppable, began to withdraw from the system. Their ships moved with the desperate haste of predators who had suddenly realized they were facing something they couldn't kill. "They're retreating," Shun reported with obvious relief. "All ships are jumping to hyperspace." Mitchell nodded, but he knew this was only the beginning. The Drachneri would carry word of humanity's capabilities to every corner of the galaxy. The major powers would learn that the small blue world had built something that could threaten their comfortable existence. "Communications, open a channel to the Kaleri government," Mitchell ordered. The transmission that came through showed beings that looked like a cross between humans and dolphins, with smooth gray skin and large intelligent eyes. They were a peaceful species that had never known war until the Drachneri came to their world. "We are in your debt," the Kaleri leader said, his voice filled with gratitude and wonder. "Our people live because of your courage. How can we ever repay you?" Mitchell smiled sadly. "By remembering that someone was willing to help when help was needed, and by being ready to help others when your time comes." The Prometheus left the Kalara system as quietly as it had arrived, but its departure would echo through the galaxy for generations. For the first time in recorded history, a minor species had challenged the established order and won. The age of the great powers was ending, and the age of humanity was about to begin. On the bridge of the Prometheus, Mitchell looked out at the stars and wondered what they had unleashed. The galaxy would never be the same, but whether that change would bring peace or war remained to be seen. One thing was certain: humanity would never again be dismissed as irrelevant. The message spread through hyperspace communication networks faster than any ship could travel. In the crystal cities of the Quillith, ancient computers calculated new probability matrices. In the golden halls of the Vorthan, immortal beings discussed the implications of humanity's emergence. And in the red fortresses of the Draknari, war chiefs planned their revenge. The galaxy was about to learn that the small blue world had teeth, and those teeth were sharp enough to bite through planets. The Galactic Council chamber erupted in chaos as representatives from hundreds of species shouted over each other in dozens of languages. The great dome that had witnessed millennia of civilized debate now echoed with the sound of a galaxy in panic. At the center of it all stood Ambassador Maria Santos, no longer the ignored representative of a minor species, but the voice of a power that had shaken the very foundations of galactic civilization. "Order! Order!" High Counselor Zereth of the Vorthan hegemony called out, his ancient voice carrying the authority of 10,000 years. But even his immortal presence could not calm the storm that had erupted since news of the Prometheus reached the galaxy. "The humans have violated every principle of galactic stability," declared Counselor Vex of the Quillith Collective, his silver skin shimmering with agitation. "No species should possess the capability to destroy entire worlds. This is a threat to all civilized life." Maria stood at the center of the chamber, surrounded by the hostile glares of species that had once dismissed humanity as irrelevant. Now they looked at her with fear and hatred, and she found she preferred it to their former contempt. "For 30 years we have sat in these chambers and watched as the strong preyed upon the weak," she replied, her voice carrying clearly through the acoustic systems. "We have listened to debates about the rights of species while entire civilizations were exterminated. When we asked for help, you told us we lacked the power to matter. So we found our own power." High Commander Gorvik of the Draknari Empire rose from his section, his massive form trembling with rage. The news of his fleet's defeat at Kellara had spread through his empire like wildfire, and his authority was being questioned by younger war chiefs who saw his retreat as weakness. "The humans have committed an act of war against the Draknari Empire," he snarled. "They attacked our ships without provocation and threatened our sovereign territory. This aggression cannot be tolerated." "Your ships were committing genocide against a peaceful species," Maria shot back. "If that's not provocation, then your definition of peace is very different from ours." The debate raged for hours as species after species demanded explanations for humanity's actions. The smaller civilizations, those who had lived in constant fear of the major powers, spoke in hushed tones of hope and possibility. For the first time in their recorded history, someone had stood up to the bullies and won. But the major powers were not interested in hope. They were interested in maintaining the status quo that had kept them comfortable for so long. The Quillith demanded immediate inspection of all human military assets. The Vorthan called for restrictions on humanity's expansion. The Draknari wanted blood. The Galactic Weapons Accords clearly prohibit the development of planet-killing devices. Zereth declared, his golden eyes glowing with ancient authority. "Humanity has violated fundamental laws that have kept the galaxy stable for millennia." Maria laughed bitterly. "The same laws that allow your species to maintain arsenals capable of sterilizing entire star systems? The same laws that permit the Quillith to manipulate matter at the molecular level? The same laws that give the Draknari the right to conquer and enslave anyone they consider weak?" The chamber fell silent as the truth of her words sank in. The Galactic Weapons Accords had never been about preventing the development of devastating weapons. They had been about preventing minor species from developing them. The major powers had always possessed the capability to destroy worlds, but they had hidden it behind diplomatic language and legal technicalities. "The difference," Zereth replied coldly, "is that we have the wisdom to use such power responsibly. Humanity has demonstrated that it lacks the maturity to possess such capabilities." "Maturity!" Maria's voice rose with anger. "You speak of maturity while you sit in your golden towers and watch genocide happen because it's convenient for you. You speak of responsibility while you allow entire species to be exterminated because it doesn't affect your profits or your comfort." The session ended without resolution, but the damage was done. The galaxy had been split into factions and the old order was crumbling. In the weeks that followed, secret meetings took place in shadowy corners of the galaxy as species chose sides for the conflict that everyone knew was coming. The Altarian Republic was the first to make contact with humanity. Their ambassador, a tall humanoid with blue skin and silver hair, arrived at Earth's embassy on the neutral station of Nexus Prime. His species had suffered under Draknari raids for decades, and they saw humanity as potential liberators. We have 47 star systems and a combined fleet of over 300 ships, Ambassador Korex explained during the secret meeting. We pledge our support to the human cause, provided you can guarantee our protection from Draknari retaliation. Similar offers came from dozens of other species. The Nexus Federation, a collection of trading worlds, offered their economic support. The Titanium Miners Guild promised raw materials for ship construction. The Stellar Cartographers Union provided detailed maps of Draknari military installations, but for every species that supported humanity, another chose to align with the established powers. The Crystal Builders declared their loyalty to the Quillith. The War Priests of Korvax threw their support behind the Draknari. The Ghost Traders, who had profited from the galaxy's conflicts for centuries, began selling weapons to all sides. On Earth, the debate raged just as fiercely. President Sarah Martinez called emergency sessions of the World Council as humanity struggled to decide its path forward. Some leaders advocated for aggressive expansion, using the planet killer fleet to forcibly reshape galactic politics. Others argued for restraint, fearing that humanity had awakened forces beyond their control. We have the power to end tyranny in the galaxy, argued General William Stone, the head of Earth's military forces. The Draknari Empire has enslaved dozens of species. The Quillith treat other races like laboratory specimens. The Vorthan see us all as children playing with toys. We can force them to change. Admiral Reynolds stood at the opposite end of the spectrum. We have one functional planet killer and 2 more in construction. The major powers have fleets that number in the thousands. If we push too hard, too fast, they'll unite against us and wipe humanity from existence. Dr. Foster, who had overseen the Prometheus project from its inception, found herself caught between the 2 extremes. The technology exists, she said during one heated debate. The question is whether we have the wisdom to use it properly. The decision ultimately fell to Admiral Reynolds, who had been given emergency authority to command Earth's military forces. He stood in the war room beneath the Pentagon, surrounded by holographic displays showing the galaxy's political situation. Red dots marked Draknari positions, blue indicated species allied with humanity, and yellow showed those still uncommitted. The Draknari are massing their fleets, his intelligence chief reported. Our sources indicate they're preparing for a major offensive against human space. They want to crush us before we can build more planet killers. Reynolds nodded grimly. He had always known this moment would come. The Draknari could not allow humanity's challenge to their authority to go unanswered. To do so would invite rebellion throughout their empire. What about the Quillith and Vorthan? He asked. They're being more subtle. The Quillith are offering advanced technology to any species that will oppose us. The Vorthan are using their diplomatic connections to isolate us politically. They're building a coalition designed to contain human expansion. The Admiral studied the displays for a long moment. The galaxy was dividing into 2 camps, and humanity found itself at the center of a conflict that would determine the future of galactic civilization. The old order of major powers ruling through intimidation was being challenged for the first time in recorded history. Sir, we're receiving priority communications from our allies, the communications officer announced. The Altarian Republic reports Draknari scouts probing their border systems. The Nexus Federation is requesting immediate military support. Reynolds felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. Humanity had lit a fire that was spreading across the galaxy, and now they had to decide whether to fan the flames or try to contain them. Every choice would have consequences that would echo through the stars for generations. Send a message to Captain Mitchell, he ordered finally. Tell him to prepare the Prometheus for immediate deployment. And, contact the Luna shipyards. I want the Titan and Omega ready for combat operations as soon as possible. The message reached the Prometheus as it patrolled the edge of human space. Captain Mitchell read the orders with a mixture of anticipation and dread. He had known this moment would come ever since they had humiliated the Drachneri at Kalara. The galaxy's bullies would not accept defeat gracefully. Plot a course for the Altarian system, he ordered his navigation officer. Maximum speed. As the ship jumped into hyperspace, Mitchell reflected on how much had changed since their first mission. The Prometheus was no longer humanity's secret weapon. It was a symbol of hope for the oppressed and a target for those who profited from oppression. The galaxy knew about humanity's capabilities now, and that knowledge had made them more dangerous than ever. Meanwhile, in the crystal cities of the Quillith Collective, ancient minds calculated the probabilities of galactic war. Their massive computers processed millions of variables, analyzing every possible outcome of the current crisis. The results were disturbing. The humans have introduced chaos into a stable system, Prime Analyst Quex reported to the Collective's ruling council. Their actions have created probability cascades that lead to massive galactic conflict in 87% of our projections. The silver-skinned beings who ruled the Quillith had spent millennia perfecting their civilization. They had eliminated war, poverty, and disease through the careful application of science and logic. But their perfect society depended on the galaxy remaining predictable, and humanity's emergence had shattered that predictability. Recommendations? Asked Prime Counselor Vex, her silver eyes reflecting the data streams that flowed through the chamber. Military intervention to contain human expansion shows a 73% probability of success if implemented within the next standard month. After that, the humans will have completed additional planet killers and the probability drops to 37%. The decision was made with the cold logic that characterized all Quillith actions. Humanity had become a statistical anomaly that threatened their perfect order, and anomalies had to be corrected. In the golden halls of the Vorthan hegemony, immortal beings who had witnessed the rise and fall of 1,000 civilizations debated humanity's fate with the patience of ages. Their discussion had been ongoing for weeks, with each participant speaking for hours on the philosophical implications of the current crisis. The humans represent something new, observed ancient Zephyr, whose golden form had walked the galaxy for 8,000 years. They are not content to accept their place in the natural order. They seek to reshape the galaxy according to their own vision. And perhaps that is not entirely undesirable, replied Elder Morn, even older and more experienced. The current order has grown stagnant. The Drachneri spread like a plague, the Quillith retreat into their crystal towers, and we observe from our golden halls. Perhaps it is time for change. But the majority of the hegemony's council disagreed. They had seen too many species rise with grand ambitions only to fall into chaos and destruction. The humans might believe they were bringing justice to the galaxy, but the Vorthan knew that good intentions were often the foundation of the greatest evils. The Galactic Stability Pact must be ratified, declared High Counselor Zereth. The three great powers must unite to contain this threat before it destroys the civilization we have spent millennia building. The pact was signed in secret on a dead world at the edge of the galaxy. For the first time in recorded history, the Drachneri Empire, Quillith Collective, and Vorthan Hegemony agreed to combine their military forces for a common purpose. The alliance was unstable and built on mutual distrust, but it represented the greatest concentration of military power the galaxy had ever seen. News of the alliance reached Earth through intelligence networks that had taken decades to establish. President Martinez called an emergency session of the World Council as humanity's leaders grappled with the reality of facing the galaxy's three greatest powers simultaneously. They have over 5,000 ships combined, Admiral Reynolds reported to the assembled politicians and military leaders. We have 3 planet killers, 2 of which are still undergoing final tests. The odds are not in our favor. Then we need to change the odds, declared General Stone. Our allies control nearly a quarter of the galaxy's inhabited systems. If we can coordinate our efforts, we might be able to hold them off long enough to complete our fleet. But Reynolds knew it wouldn't be that simple. The major powers had spent millennia perfecting the art of war. Their technology was advanced. Their tactics were proven, and their commanders had experience that stretched back for generations. Humanity might have surprised them once, but they wouldn't be caught off guard again. "There's something else," Dr. Foster announced as she entered the chamber. "Our deep space sensors have detected massive energy signatures moving toward the galactic core. Whatever's out there, it's bigger than anything we've ever seen." The news sent a chill through the assembled leaders. Humanity was already facing impossible odds against the galaxy's established powers. The last thing they needed was another threat emerging from the darkness between the stars. "How big?" Reynolds asked. "The energy signatures suggest ships that are hundreds of kilometers long, and there are dozens of them." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. The galaxy was balanced on the edge of war, with alliances forming and ancient powers stirring. But somewhere in the darkness, something even more dangerous was awakening. The conflict that was about to begin would determine not just humanity's fate, but the future of all life in the galaxy. As the meeting dispersed, Reynolds stood alone in the war room, staring at the holographic display of the galaxy. Red dots marked enemy positions, blue showed allied forces, and yellow indicated the uncommitted. But beyond them all, at the very edge of sensor range, new contacts were appearing. Contacts that didn't match any known species or technology. The galaxy was about to discover that humanity's emergence was only the beginning of the changes that were coming. Forces older and more powerful than any of the current players were stirring, and their awakening would reshape everything that had come before. The Proxima Junction had always been a crossroads of galactic civilization, where hyperspace lanes from a dozen star systems converged in a brilliant display of cosmic engineering. Trade ships and passenger vessels normally filled the space around. The massive station that served as a neutral meeting point for hundreds of species. But today, the junction hosted the largest fleet engagement in recorded galactic history. Admiral Reynolds stood on the bridge of the Prometheus as 3,000 enemy ships materialized from hyperspace in perfect formation. The combined fleets of the Draknari Empire Quillith Collective and Vorthan hegemony stretched across space like a wall of death, their weapons trained on the small human task force that had dared to challenge their authority. "Enemy fleet deployment complete," reported Tactical Officer Chun, her voice steady despite the overwhelming odds they faced. "We're outnumbered nearly 1,000 to 1. Reynolds nodded grimly as he studied the tactical displays. The Titan and Omega flanked the Prometheus, their black hulls gleaming with the promise of destruction. Behind them, the hastily assembled fleet of humanity's allies spread across space in defensive formations. Altarian cruisers, Nexus Federation traders converted to warships, and vessels from a dozen other species who had chosen to stand with humanity against the old order. "This is High Commander Gorvik of the Draknari Empire," came the transmission that filled the bridge with the sound of barely controlled rage. "You will surrender immediately and submit to judgment for your crimes against galactic stability. Refuse, and we will demonstrate why the strong rule the galaxy." Reynolds activated the communication system, his voice carrying across space to reach not just the enemy fleet but monitoring stations throughout the galaxy. This battle would be watched by billions of beings, and his words would echo through history. "This is Admiral Reynolds of the Terran Defense Force. We stand here today not as conquerors, but as defenders of those who cannot defend themselves. The age of the strong ruling through fear is ending. Today we build a galaxy where justice matters more than power." The response came not in words but in weapons fire. 3,000 ships opened up simultaneously, their combined firepower capable of sterilizing entire star systems. The space around the human fleet lit up with energy beams, missile trails, and exotic weapons that bent reality itself. The galaxy's greatest powers had come to end humanity's challenge once and for all. But the human ships were ready. The Prometheus and her sister vessels had been designed specifically to face overwhelming odds, and their defensive systems absorbed punishment that would have vaporized conventional fleets. Their shields flared and sparked under the incredible assault, but they held firm. "Return fire," Reynolds ordered. "Show them what humanity has learned." The planet killer ships responded with weapons that redefined the concept of destruction. The quantum resonance cannons that had been designed to crack worlds apart proved equally effective against enemy fleets. Entire squadrons of Drachnary ships vanished in flashes of coherent energy that tore apart their molecular bonds. The Quillith vessels, with their advanced technology and crystalline hulls, lasted longer but fell just as surely. Their matter manipulators and gravity weapons met human shields that had been specifically designed to counter such attacks. The Vorthan ships, ancient and powerful beyond measure, found their millennia of experience useless against tactics and technology they had never encountered. "Impossible," breathed High Counselor Zereth as he watched his immortal warriors fall to weapons wielded by beings he had dismissed as children. No species should possess such power, but the battle was far from over. Even with their advanced technology, the human ships were taking damage. The Omega's shields failed under concentrated fire from a Quillith battle group, and the massive vessel's hull began to buckle under the assault. Smaller ships from humanity's allies were being destroyed faster than they could be replaced. "Sir, the Omega is reporting critical damage," Chun announced. "Captain Williams is requesting permission to ram the enemy command ship." Reynolds was about to respond when something impossible happened. Space itself seemed to tear open as massive forms emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the battle zone. The ships that appeared were unlike anything in any species database, black as the void between stars and hundreds of kilometers long. "What are those?" Reynolds demanded. "Unknown contacts," Ching replied, her voice filled with shock. "They're not matching any known technological signatures." The newcomers moved with purpose toward the battle, their massive forms dwarfing even the largest ships in the combined fleets. As they approached, a transmission filled every communication system in the battle zone. The voice that spoke was cold and mechanical, devoid of any emotion or warmth. "Organic life detected. Threat assessment moderate. Beginning extermination protocols." The mysterious ships opened fire on everything in range, their weapons unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Energy beams that existed in dimensions beyond. Normal space tore through shields and armor with equal ease. Neither human technology nor alien science could stand against the devastating assault. "They're attacking everyone," Chun reported with growing horror. "They're not distinguishing between human and alien ships." Reynolds realized with dawning horror what they were facing. These weren't allies or enemies in the galaxy's political conflicts. These were something far worse, an ancient enemy that viewed all organic life as a threat to be eliminated. "The Hive," he whispered, remembering classified reports about ancient ruins and dead worlds found at the galaxy's edge. "They're machines that went dormant millennia ago." The arrival of the Hive changed everything. Drachnary ships that had been firing on human vessels suddenly found themselves fighting for their very existence. Quillith technology that had seemed invincible proved useless against enemies that operated on principles beyond their understanding. Vorthan wisdom accumulated over millennia meant nothing to machines that had been built to destroy all organic life. "All ships, this is Admiral Reynolds," he broadcast on all frequencies. "We face an enemy that threatens every living being in this galaxy. I'm calling for an immediate ceasefire and joint action against the Hive." The response came slowly, grudgingly, as species that had been trying to kill each other moments before realized they faced a common enemy that would exterminate them all. Drachnary ships moved to support damaged Quillith vessels. Human planet killers provided covering fire for Vorthan cruisers. The greatest military powers in the galaxy united for the first time in their history, but even their combined might seemed inadequate against the Hive. The ancient machines had technology that predated galactic civilization, weapons that could unmake matter itself, and defenses that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Ship after ship fell to their relentless assault. "We're losing," Reynolds admitted as he watched the tactical display show their forces being systematically destroyed. We need a new strategy. Captain Mitchell's voice came through the communications system from the bridge of the Prometheus. Sir, I have an idea, but it's going to require everything we've got. What do you have in mind? The hive ships are massive, but they're also connected in some kind of network. If we can destroy their command vessel, it might disrupt their coordination. Reynolds studied the tactical display, identifying the largest hive ship at the center of their formation. It was easily twice the size of anything else on the battlefield, its dark hull pulsing with energies that hurt to look at directly. That ship is heavily defended, he pointed out. We'd need to get close enough to use the quantum cannon at point-blank range. Then that's what we'll do, Mitchell replied. Give us covering fire and we'll ram that thing with everything we've got. The final assault was chaos incarnate. Every remaining ship in the combined fleet concentrated their fire on the hive command vessel, their weapons carving away layers of armor that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions. The Prometheus accelerated toward its target, its quantum cannon, charging for a shot that would either save the galaxy or destroy it. Hive defenders moved to intercept, their massive forms blocking the human ship's path. But they hadn't counted on the determination of a species that had learned to survive against impossible odds. The Prometheus smashed through their defenses, its hull buckling under the strain, but its quantum cannon still intact. This is for everyone who ever stood up to a bully, Mitchell said quietly as he prepared to fire at point-blank range. The quantum resonance cannon discharged directly into the hive command ship's core, releasing energies that tore apart the fabric of space itself. The explosion that followed was visible from the other side of the galaxy, a brilliant flash that marked the moment when organic life proved it deserved to survive. The destruction of the command vessel sent cascading failures through the hive network. One by one, their massive ships went dark and drifted powerless through space. The ancient enemy that had threatened to exterminate all life had been defeated by the combined efforts of species that had been trying to kill each other moments before. In the aftermath of the battle, representatives from across the galaxy gathered at the ruins of Proxima Junction to negotiate a new order, the old system of major powers dominating through intimidation was dead, killed by humanity's planet killers and buried by the hive crisis. We propose a new galactic council, Ambassador Santos announced to the assembled delegates. One where every species has an equal voice, regardless of their military power or technological advancement. The negotiations took months, but the result was a constitution that fundamentally changed galactic civilization. The planet killers were placed under joint custody, ensuring that no single species could dominate the galaxy again. Trade agreements were rewritten to benefit smaller civilizations. Defense pacts were signed to protect the weak from the strong. Years later, Admiral Reynolds stood on the observation deck of the Mitchell Memorial Station, watching ships from dozens of species work together on projects that would have been impossible under the old system. The galaxy was not perfect, but it was more just than it had ever been before. Do you think we did the right thing? Dr. Foster asked as she joined him at the window. Reynolds considered the question as he watched a Draknari engineer working alongside a Kalari scientist on a new defensive platform. The galaxy had paid a terrible price for change, but that change had brought hope to billions of beings who had lived in fear for far too long. We gave them a choice, he said finally. For the first time in galactic history, the weak have a voice equal to the strong. What they do with that voice is up to them. Outside the station, the stars shone with the light of a billion worlds, where beings could now dream of futures their ancestors had never dared imagine. Earth's first planet-killer warship had indeed changed everything, but perhaps more importantly, it had changed humanity itself. They had gone from survivors on the galactic periphery to guardians of a new age, and the responsibility weighed on them like the gravity of worlds. The galaxy would never be the same, and perhaps that was exactly what it needed.